We are back with our Brazil International Talk Show. I'm Suzanne Thorson, and our subject today is legal and general considerations for the immigrant. I'd like to invite at this moment Ms. Alexandra Sierra-De Varona that will guide us through a lot of things that we need to know before we start a business in the US. Thank you, Alexandra, for being here with us, and welcome to our show.
Thank you, Suzanne. I appreciate you having me on your show today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And also we have Marisol Gonzalez, CEO of HEY, Hispanic Entrepreneur Initiative, and she will be one of the hosts sharing with me this task today.
Thank you, Suzanne. Welcome, Alexandra.
Thank you, Marisol.
So, Alexandra, would you be able to provide a short introduction of what exactly you do and of your experience? We would like to hear a little bit before we discuss. We would like you to walk us through, please, the challenges that are out there.
Absolutely. Well, to start off, I'm the daughter of a Cuban-American immigrant. My husband's also a Cuban-American immigrant. And so I saw some of the challenges firsthand growing up with my husband. And as a business owner myself, I've walked the walk and talked the talk. As not only that I provide the advice, but I've lived it myself. And there's something to be said about that. So my name's Alexandra De Varona. I own the law firm of De Varona Law. I've been practicing law in Palm Beach County and all of South Florida for 21 years. Our firm represents clients everywhere from Miami all the way up to Orlando. What we do is there's three basic areas of the law that we focus on. First one is business, and we do everything related to business, to starting your own company, which is really exciting, and many of us have done, to preparing the contracts that you need for a company, to the point where sometimes, unfortunately, there's litigation involving companies or their owners or owners and employees. Another aspect of our business is that we do that is also very important, and we got into because our clients are entrepreneurs and asked us to do this, is we do estates and trusts. So everything dealing with your testamentary needs, wills, trusts, living wills, powers of attorneys, through litigation when there's beneficiaries and people inheriting. And I could go on and on for years talking about some of those experiences and why it's so important to do things, when you're well and you don't want to wait until something happens. And the last area of our practice is we have a real estate branch. We do a lot of title work, real estate closings, both from a commercial and residential standpoint. Our office, you can say, is a bit of a we have Latin American ambassadors, I would like to say. Our paralegals, Colombian American. One of our attorneys is from Honduras. We have another attorney who's Puerto Rican. So we have a big mix of attorneys, and Latin America is very well represented in our firm. The primary, we work a lot with entrepreneurs, and not only entrepreneurs that are coming to this country. A lot of them very, very successful in their own company, in their own countries, and looking to break in here. One of the common things that we see when we're starting to work with an entrepreneur is that, myself being Cuban American myself, is that coming from our countries, we have a very different mentality than what is in the US, and particularly Florida. And there's a saying, when in Rome, do like the Romans. So we have to learn to adapt and to recognize what we need to do and do it properly from day one in order to get everything started well from the beginning. And one of the things that I always recommend is for the new entrepreneur, even though it may cost some money in the beginning, is to surround themselves with professionals that are going to assist them. And there's always a core of professionals that I recommend. At a bare minimum, you want to have a good attorney who's going to set up your company right. And I think, Suzanne, we've talked in the past of some of the issues you've experienced with that. And a good accountant. Those are two key individuals that, in my opinion, you need to have. and need to have them from the start. And some of the ways that you could go about doing that is speaking to other entrepreneurs who have been in the area and who have worked with attorneys that are known. You can try to Google and see reviews, but a lot of times, people have their friends write those, and I don't find that they're always trustworthy. But having someone who has worked with an individual in the past, in my opinion, is one of the best ways of doing that. One of the things, Brazilian, if you prefer to speak Portuguese, or if you could speak Spanish, someone who's understand you. I have very well-educated clients that went to Harvard, went to Yale, from their countries, but even though they speak English and they speak English very well, they still prefer to speak in Spanish. And that's one of the reasons that they come to me when they need their work. And as we all know, as Latin Americans, we have oftentimes different I want to say a way of doing business than a normal American would. But once getting your business started, one of the things I recommend is choosing the right type of entity for your business. And sometimes that could be limited as to when you're not a resident or a citizen of the country, but speaking to an attorney to set up the right type of business for you and working with your accountant, Suzanne, I know can make a big impact on the amount of taxes that you pay or don't pay in the future. And so the creation from day one of the entity is key. And speaking to someone who knows the different type of entities, what your goals are, what you're trying to do. Are you looking to sell your business in the future? Those type of ideas is crucial in setting up the business. Something else that's also important is making sure that you have your proper licenses. If you're going to be renting a space, I've seen, individuals get in a lot of trouble because they didn't have a lease, or they didn't realize that a lease had certain provisions, or was for a certain amount of time, that the lease had a personal guarantee. If they didn't pay, that not only is the entity going to be liable, but they could be personally liable, them and their spouse, and that may be something that they didn't intend. So, and there's ways of negotiating these things. I would say most landlords, for example, do require a personal guarantee, but everything can be negotiated. Just because your lease may be 5 years doesn't mean you have to personally guarantee it for 5 years. And there's things that as lawyers we know that the average person doesn't. There's landlords that we may have worked with a million times. So, I pick up the phone, I know their attorney, we know what we're going to agree to, and we can simplify and get things done to protect our clients in the future. Another aspect of what we do, and it's interesting, I had a case not too long ago, is even setting up agreements between the owners of the companies. If you're planning on going into business with a partner, and I had a situation that it was two sisters, believe it or not, that went into business, and one of the sisters started competing with the other one behind the other one's back. And fortunately, my client, who was one of the sisters, was smart enough to have obtained an operating agreement that protected her and was able to, resolve the issues very quickly. These operating agreements or partnership agreements or shareholder agreements, they're all basically the same thing based upon the type of entity, but they contemplate a lot of situations that you can never imagine. Everything from you not getting along with your partner, to your partner having a disability, to your partner getting divorced. And these type of things are easier to talk about, a lot easier to talk about when everybody's getting along. When I always tell my clients that when you start not getting along with your clients, it's like getting a divorce, except you don't, there's nothing to make up after. When there's a spouse, you could always try to make up, and there's a relationship, but it is, in every sense of the word, a type of divorce. And when you talk about these type of issues when everybody's getting along, it makes it that much easier. You don't want to be discussing a separation when you can't stand the other person, or when a family member, let's say you have a partner who passes away and a family member who comes in who thinks that the company's worth millions and millions of dollars. wants to try to give a valuation to the company when they have really no idea what the company's about. So these type of things are items that we run into all the time. And when business owners don't have these sort of agreements in place, it causes that's the main source of litigation for us. Actually, with business litigation, I would say the vast majority of our litigation is between partners that didn't discuss these big issues, especially when there's a disproportionate amount of interest. When I mean, let's say one partner has a majority share and another one has a minority, how all these types of decisions are going to be made. And speaking to an attorney and talking about all those potential issues that can come up can really save the individual a lot of money, the company a lot of money, and just make things a lot easier, both from a financial and an emotional standpoint. Oftentimes I tell my clients that, you could always go litigate. Litigation is very expensive, but it's not only very expensive from a financial standpoint, it's emotionally draining. Anybody who's been involved in litigation can tell you that they'll lose sleep over it. You won't, you think somebody's going to say the truth in a deposition or a trial, and you're shocked that about what they say. It's a very, very stressful event. And if you look at the list of stressful events, it's one of the top 5 that's always listed. So it's always smart to try to avoid situations like that.
Yes, you're absolutely right. What we spoke one time exactly is that I opened an LLC when my business should have been non-for-profit, right?
Right.
This has a lot of implications after.
Yeah, even when you're raising money, you could take it as a donation. The person who's giving you the money can do it as a tax write-off. And if you don't have that set up, you can't take those benefits.
Exactly. And when you're talking about culture and art, nobody gets rich with this. This is really for spreading culture into communities, and that's why it should have been a non-for-profit. But living and learning, I hope that we're bringing for our audience, opportunity to learn before, because what I feel is that, most of our the immigrants that come to the United States, their incomes is from their country of origin, right? So their mindset is completely different from the mentality and practices of here. So, for example, trust that you were saying, wills, we usually don't have in our country. So how do you perceive this? Everywhere you go here, even to a hospital, they ask, do you have a will? People don't even know what is. So what is what would you tell, our audience about those tools that we have, here, and that should be taken advantage of?
Yeah, and there's 4 tools with that I recommend every person should have. The first one is a power of attorney. And that power of attorney is so important, especially if you're a business owner or looking to be a business owner. A lot of my clients, pre-COVID, they traveled a lot. Okay. And so there are some times that they had to have a business transaction, a wire had to go out or a decision had to go, and they were not reachable. But leaving someone in charge with that power of attorney to make certain decisions is key to moving those items along. The power of attorney becomes most important. God forbid you become incapacitated. And if you don't have a power of attorney, from a legal standpoint, the person who wants to make those decisions for you would have to go to court and get what's called a guardianship over you to make those decisions. That's not only a costly endeavor, but it's timely. And, in a situation where you have to make decisions, medical, financial, one of the things that we see a lot is that insurance companies won't speak to a spouse or a family member if they don't have a power of attorney, and oftentimes they'll deny claims and they'll take advantage of those situations. And not having a person who can speak to them that knows what you want or knows what you need can be a life or death thing, having the ability to have a medical treatment paid for. And so in my opinion, a power of attorney, it's not an expensive thing. And it's something that every person, the second that my daughter who turned 18 went away to college, I made sure I got that signed. And I tell all parents who have college students, God forbid your child is off at a university and gets, in an accident. If they're 18 or over, the doctor does not have to speak to you. The doctor does not have to let you make a decision. The doctor doesn't have to let you have access to their medical records. They're a legal adult now. And so these are things that I tell my clients that they don't think about of the importance of a power of attorney. A living will and a trust can also dictate. A living will, what comes in when to prevent once you're incapacitated completely and you're living off artificial means, that a doctor would come in and if you don't want to be resuscitated, they need to pull the plug. That's what the living will is used for. So you don't keep, living on those artificial means. But a trust also helps put people in place. A trust is a document, like what it stands for. You're trusting someone else than the court to take over your assets, and you could put your business in there and put people to continue running everything and pass everything on to your beneficiaries without having the need to go to court. I can tell you now with COVID, we haven't had a hearing since March 13th in person, and the estates are running slow, very, very slow, and it's taking an average of 1 to 2 years to transfer assets from one family member to another, because of the situation that we're in. And if you have a trust, you could avoid that whole process. So that's something that, in my opinion, is important and that everyone should really think about. If you have minor children, designating a guardian for those kids is important. You don't want the state to get involved and pick one for you.
Yeah, another thing that I think is very interesting is that you can, on the trust, say how you want the funds to be disbursed, right? So, for example, if the kid is a certain age, 30% will be given, and then you wait till the kid is more mature to really be able to manage. I thought that was very interesting. So you can designate a guardian, right? And that will have access to X amount of money per month or per year. And then you go, like, you really pick how you want it to be transferred, right?
You're absolutely right. And thinking about that, you could trust your children as much as you want, but you don't know who they're going to marry. You don't know which friends are going to come into their lives. And that's why it's so important, in my opinion, to stage things out. I've seen it all. I had a pet trust case the other day where I had a woman left $1 million to her dog and cat. I had another client who left $1 million to some parrots. I mean, the ability to do things with trust. I had another client, very wealthy, who was adamant that he wanted his kids to work. And for every dollar that they earned, the trust was going to pay them $1. So, I mean, what you can do with trust is at your liberty, whatever you desire. And that's one of the beautiful things about that.
Alexandra, going back to the contract side of business.
Sure.
What are the most important kind of contracts that you think a business owner has to have in place?
Okay, so one of the ones that I was discussing was the operating agreement, which if it's it would be a shareholders agreement or partnership agreement. That's key to running the business. If you're getting to the point where you have employees, an employment contract, especially if you have information that's key to your business, you want to have an employment contract that keeps your important information confidential. An employment contract that prohibits your employee from learning everything of your business and then opening and competing down the street. And under Florida law, you can prohibit someone from competing in your area up to 2 years if you can demonstrate to a court that they learned from you, that you have clients that they can take from you, and if they learn certain aspects of the business and then go and take it to another side. Non-solicitation provisions. The last thing you want is to have one of your employees establish these great relationship with your clients and then decide to open shop right next door and take your clients from you. Everyone works really hard to develop those relationships. Anyone who's owned a business knows that those things don't just happen overnight. And so there's ways that you can protect that. Our company does a lot of those employment agreements, and we go in and we enforce them. And we've been very successful in enforcing non-compete agreements and getting injunctions and forcing the employee who has breached those agreements to pay back the company. But, if you have an individual like that and you don't protect yourself, that can cause a lot of damage.
Yeah, very important. And another question, going back to Suzanne's comment, I don't know anything about law. Is it possible for a business that was incorporated as an INC, LLC, change that what they were created as for a different thing?
Absolutely. Now, for profit to go nonprofit, it's a lot more difficult. But you can always change, let's say, from an LLC to an Inc. or an Inc. to an LLC or to a corporation. There are ways of doing that. And I've had clients go from a corporation, which, for example, has a double taxation structure, go to an LLC or an Inc. That is absolutely possible.
Alexandra, but there is also this new figure. There are several new figures of business for-profit companies. In
Sure.
a way, I'm just thinking about your company, Suzanne, here. One is the B Corp that now exists in Florida, but now there is also the Social Purpose Corporation.
Yes.
That is still a for-profit corporation, but
Right.
give a percentage of what they make into a non-profit, and it gives them some kind of advantages and tax breaks and all that.
Sure.
So could a for-profit go into one of these?
Yes, they absolutely can. It's just filing the right paperwork. And, I love those entities because it really gives back. Not only, I think it gives a purpose for the company, and it's a great way of giving back to the community. And yes, it is absolutely possible to do that.
There you go, Susan.
Yeah, what I heard that is the easiest way would be open a non-for-profit that you want. However, when you have already a story and a name, and you don't want to give up the name. So I agree with Alexandra that in fact you have to find the right professionals on the beginning before you establish.
Right.
So that will guide you to what really is the best way. And that's what we're doing here with the show, right? Trying to educate a little more so that other people don't fall on the same mistakes that we had. But thank you, Marisol.
Yeah, and now that it is so easy to connect via Zoom with professionals in the US, even though you may still be in your country of origin, that is the best way to do it. Before you even put one foot here in the US, do your own research, but do not trust the internet. The internet has the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you need to see, like you said, who is the right professional. If I want to know about my contracts and my business, somebody like Alexandra, somebody that is vetted, would be the best person or expert to advise. So I believe if people are seeing this show outside the US, you can start doing that work even before you come. That avoids a lot of mistakes and problems in the future.
That's a good point, Marisol. After COVID has been great. I almost feel like the world has gotten smaller. Last week I had a Zoom conference with clients in Argentina, potential clients in Argentina who were referred by some of my clients here. I've spoken to people in Spain. I've spoken to people in Mexico, in Venezuela, although the connection in Venezuela is not very good. Yes, it's the world has become a smaller place, in my opinion, because of technology, and it's very possible. It's made it a lot easier to connect, in my opinion.
That's for sure, but I think that the challenge is knowing the right person. If you're lucky enough to have someone that refers you to a good professional, as we're saying, and before you come, we can speak with you and have real, that's awesome. But many people start all over again in another country, and they Google, or they will go try to like search for a professional, and many times like what you think that is a good professional
Right.
is not, so when you're in your country of origin, the best doctors, the lawyers, everything, because you grew there and you have a relation, not only family but friends. When you come to another country, then you have to start all over again, and sometimes as an adult. So it's much harder. You didn't go to school here, so you didn't learn a lot of these right mechanisms and things that is different, the dynamics in another country.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, but I think that it helps the fact that you speak both languages. I think that that's also because Hispanics and Brazilians can understand what you're explaining. Sometimes they can't even understand fully, like if it's
Absolutely.
another language.
Absolutely.
It goes back to mentality all the time, the mindset that you bring from Brazil or Latin America. One of the things I see with the Hispanic entrepreneur clients or members is that a lot of them still believe in gentleman's agreement. We shake our hand,
Yeah.
but because a lot of them did it in their country that way, we are in a way very trusting, and it has nothing to do with how educated you are. But here the consequences are immense. A simple case would be somebody doing something, renting a place with the landlord and saying, oh, then the business goes down right away, and oh, I will talk to my landlord. No, 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 no. That doesn't work like that. You will talk to the lawyer of the landlord. So from the beginning, having the right advice, we always say at the Hispanic Entrepreneur Initiative that it is very expensive not to know. The cost of not knowing is really high. So all these professionals that will help you create that foundation, that is an investment. Because if you don't do it well, you are going to spend much more. And like we were saying before, when you go talk to your lawyer, but you are in an emotional state that is not the ideal, you cannot even understand what they are trying to tell you. So it is mistake over mistake. So do it well, get the right advice. We say that all the time, no, Susan?
Oh yes, and when I say about the languages, because not only when you're emotional, but sometimes you didn't properly learn the language of where you're going. We are all Latins, and like I do agree that it's great to form a community, let's say, where you speak Spanish. However, you need to know the language of where you're living as well. One time, my husband is American. We went to a store, and the salesperson only spoke Spanish.
Yeah.
I had to translate to him in his country. Think about that,
Yeah.
so us as professionals, we have also we have to get educated. You have to get here and learn skills. Even if you don't have, you have to adapt to a different country,
Yeah.
right? or you will write someone in a broken English, and the other one is not going to understand. So I think that, for example, one service that I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Alexandra, that is also crucial is about preparing letters that probably as a lawyer you can, have models of how the communication should be said. Is that correct?
100%. And I was going to mention, going back, that if you're a company that's in the service industry or a company that sells goods, it's important to have contracts with your clients, then that they understand the services that they're getting. One of the litigations that I'm involved now, it involves a client of mine who was doing certain services, didn't have the right type of agreement, just I'm doing my services for X amount of money, and that's it. Not a very well written agreement. Well, she had agreed to that amount of money, and her client said, well, yeah, that's the amount I agreed to, but your client promised to do 1,000,000 things when my client thought she was only doing 1,000. And so if you don't have the type of, exactly what you're doing for that individual or a properly written contract, you could get sued, for breaching the contract because the contract didn't specify, or or if you have a handshake deal, and let's say, I told my client I was going to prepare an operating agreement, but my client comes back and says, no, Alexandra, you were going to open my business, prepare an employment agreement. You're going to do this for the $1,000 that I paid you. So it's important to document these things. And unfortunately, living in South Florida, we have people who live on litigation. We call them professional plaintiffs. They go out there and they try to take advantage of whatever situation you can get. And what I like to think, most people are honest. There are a lot of people who aren't. And, a lot of us come from the old school where we do the handshake deal and we're a person of our word, but not everyone, unfortunately, is like that.
Oh, this is a little bit of advice. If you are going to get a partner or do something with somebody, do a little bit research on that person. And something that I didn't know, but it is telling a lot, is internet says everything. And one of the things is when this person is kind of like a ghost, there is no property, no car, nothing on its name. It should be a red flag, because it may be a person that is used to go after litigation and is also protected because it's not having anything that is their own property. So that I didn't know, but it's a red flag when you are going to deal with somebody.
So that is such a good point. And there's so many places that you can look. I can tell you, I have had a lot of Latin American people invest in companies or with a partner, and it was all a scam. And some of them they could have found out had they done a little bit of research. Some of them, there was nothing about this individual. I had one particular Venezuelan client who lost $1 million with someone who was going to be investing her her money for her, and this person just completely took advantage of her, unfortunately. But had she done a little bit of research, she could have seen that this individual had a lot of lawsuits against him, and this wasn't the first time that he did it. And you could go into the courthouse records. Every county, Palm Beach County, Broward County, Miami-Dade County, has a court docket. And you could go in there and you could type a person's name or the name of a company. And I always tell my clients, look at that, see if there's somebody out, who are you going out there? Do they have litigation against them? You could even see if there's litigation, you could see the type of lawsuit and it'll have the allegations in there. Make sure if you're dealing with a Florida entity or an entity from out of the state, make sure it's registered. That's the first thing I always do when I have a contract for one of my clients. I get on Sunbiz or I get on whatever the division of corporations is for that state. Make sure that entity exists. I've caught some where it'll say, Florida Blue University Inc. And you look it up, it doesn't even exist. And they're asking my client to invest, $500,000. And I'll come back. I'm like, this is a huge flag. This company doesn't exist. And the person will go, oh, we're going to create it or whatnot. I had a client from Italy contact me a while ago and tried, to find out some of this information. She wanted to invest $750,000 in a company here, an ice cream store. And I looked at it. I'm like, well, have you looked at the financials? Have you looked to see that this exists? Have you looked to see who the former partners were and why they weren't with them? She goes, no, no, no. So when we started digging, this individual had 4 partners, all who backed out, all who ended up in litigation with this individual. That's a huge red flag. I hope that I prevented my client from, losing a lot of money. But this individual had promised her that he was going to open all these stores and told her a story. We looked in, those stores didn't exist. So like Marisol said, the internet can be a very powerful tool, and looking into who you're going to do business with. Like I said, it could be a marriage, and it could hope, if you do the right work, it could be very, very profitable. But if you don't do your homework, it could also be a living nightmare for you.
Yeah, it's a very litigious society here.
Mm-hmm.
I recently heard a case that, like, I never thought about that. You know that there are gated communities, is very common here, right? And so you buy a nice house in a gated community, and then there's an altercation between two of the that live there. Not only they can sue between them, they can sue the administration of that community, and
Yeah,
everyone has to pay. Like there comes like extra, and
yeah,
it's
they get
mandatory.
assessed.
So it's
Yeah,
crazy.
and having the right asset protection is an important thing. I'll tell you about another case I had. Very sad, very sweet client of mine. She did very well with her businesses and ended up buying a lot of rental properties. And she kept all of those rental properties in her name, and had what she should have done, in my opinion, is create an entity for each one of those rental properties. And the reason you do that is, God forbid something happens with a tenant and they fall and they sue you, they could only go after that property itself. In my client's situation, she ended up getting in a very bad car accident. It's not really known. She claims that this individual, a 19-year-old kid, turned on his motorcycle in front of her. She hit him with her SUV. The kid ended up dying, unfortunately. Well, his parents and his estate went after her, and they went after all of her properties. They claimed that this 19-year-old boy was going to go to med school and he was going to be worth millions and millions of dollars. And so she lost some of the properties because she had them. Had she simply just put those properties in an LLC or an Inc. or a separate entity and not had them in her own individual name, they would have been protected from a lawsuit like that. And those are things that people don't think about. She, like, all of us, always did the right thing, worked hard, didn't think that there would be people that would sue her, never imagined getting into an accident that was a real tragedy. But those type of things, there's things you can always do to protect yourself in a litigious society like the one we live in.
And can companies, like, let's imagine you're an employee of a company
Mm-hmm.
and something happens, nobody's perfect, like you will do a mistake or something like that. Can the company fire you? Okay, they fire, but can they go after, like, sue personally this employee when, like, or should you have any kind of insurance for that? Like, what would be your advice? Like,
Yeah.
be a little more protected.
That's a good point, Suzanne. There's a lot of insurances that a company should have in place when you're starting. Everything from general liability, if you're a professional liability, officer and director liability, um, to protect yourself from things like that. A company runs through its employees, so it's typically when they get in litigation, it's because an employee did something. Sometimes the employee will be named individually, sometimes not. Sometimes they decide just to go after the company. But having a good insurance policy in place will protect the company. If you have the proper insurance, the insurance company will appoint an attorney for you to defend the company and potentially the employee, depending on the type of insurance that you have, and also pay if there was in fact something wrong done. Mistakes happen for those damages. And so having the proper insurances in place can really save a business. Sometimes, I have companies that they cut trees, around the state of Florida, especially after hurricanes. They've had people injured, employees on the job, eh, obviously an accident, but had they not had proper insurance in place, that employee probably wouldn't have had their medical treatment paid for, and the company probably would have had to shut down. So, Suzanne, that's a very good point. Insurance is always important to consider. And there's so much that you can do with insurance, even to the point where there's something called key man insurance. And so if there's an individual, let's say, my firm, a rainmaker, somebody who brings in business, every business has an individual who generates and brings the business. Well, what do you do if that person becomes incapacitated? What do you do if that person dies? And, if you're a business owner and you want the business to pay, your family, you can have life insurance. The business can have life insurance on your life, and then, give your children or your spouse money for what, the business is worth. They could also help your employees buy you out of the business. And the business can continue so that your clients don't have to worry if something happens to you. So, the insurance world is another aspect that is always important to look into, especially after the company's been in business for several years and has certain key people who are part of that company.
Sure. For example, life entertainment company as ours, many places for you to perform, you have to have a policy, and they even tell the limit. Oh, 1 million to cover that, 2 million to cover whatever. So there are even guidelines, right, that you have to follow. And it is very important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I used to have a signs company before, and either the university or a business, depending on the kind of signage, we had to show the proof of insurance, up to 1 million, up to 2 million, depends, and also add the company's name to our insurance.
Correct. That's an additional.
So we had to get every time a small additional policy, so their name was included. So that would protect that company, twice. So I believe businesses, it doesn't matter how small you are, you can have some form of insurance. Depending on what you do, it will be more or less expensive. But in this country, you need to have insurance. And now that we are entering hurricane season, having those insurance in place, having a contingency plan in place. You need to know, what if your business is interrupted for 2 weeks? That can put some people out of business. So everything is about being prepared and to have those processes in place. And we always say it doesn't matter if you are just one person in your in your little business. You need to think like a company. You need to think like an organization, and that way you are going to get there. And one day you will have 5, one day you will have 10, one day you will have 20 employees. But it starts from day one, doing your work.
That's a really good point, Marisol.
No, it's very good. And it is true. In our countries, we don't have all these mechanisms. And I think that it's very important to have everything in place, right? Because this is the country of insurance. You have insurance for everything, right? Yeah, you can
We
insure
do.
whatever you.
But also, this is the country that I admire because there are so many opportunities to learn and to prepare yourselves. There are non-profit organizations like Hey, there is a small business administration. There are so many sources that you can reach out to understand how to do your business and do it well. So there are the resources out there. The problem is sometimes there are so many that it becomes overwhelming and people don't know where to start. So I'm going to take this second to just give an invitation to the people listening here to follow the Hispanic Entrepreneur Initiative on our Hey Florida page on Facebook or Instagram. Here it is, because we offer this kind of trainings and we offer them with professionals that have been vetted, that people we know are good at what they do and have been doing it for years. And that's the way you can start protecting yourself, by educating yourself and learning how to do that process.
Excellent. This is also a country that values the small businesses, right?
Mhm.
Like it's a big, like, percentage of the employment comes from small businesses. So I think the people have to really understand what they're going through, but we have so many things like support mechanisms here because it's very valued. Alexandra, would you like to give any other more, like, do you have anything else that you would like to speak to our audience? Leave any phone number or any kind of what's the best way to reach you?
Sure. If you want information about our firm, you could go to deveronalaw.com. You could read about myself, the other attorneys here, our paralegal, the type of work that we do. My email address is A as in Apple, S as in Sam, D as in dog, at deveronalaw.com. Our general office line is 561 600 9070. With my clients, I like to give a hands-on touch. Most of my clients have my personal cell phone numbers, and they're able to reach me even on the weekends and at night. I know that, there could be situations that come up that if you get sued, you don't want to wait until, the next morning to hear from an attorney, or a situation, at an office that, you need a lawyer to put out a fire. I try to do that, give that extra hand holding with my clients, to the extent that I am able.
Yeah, this personal.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Marisol, is there anything else you would like to add before we end our show?
No, I just want to say thank you again to Alexandra for being here and for enlightening our audience and the hostess. So thank you so much. And thank you, Susan. Always a pleasure.
Thank you for having me, ladies.
Oh, it was our pleasure. So thank you so much. This is the end of our show. We will be back always on the first Thursday of each month with a subject of interest to our minorities, our communities, and all the foreigners that arrive in US. Also, a recording of this show will be available at bocatribune.tv. Okay, so thank you so much. Until our next show. Thank you,
Take
Alexandra.
care.
Bye. Bye, Marisol. Thank you.